At UFC 306 over the weekend, headlined by Sean O'Malley and Merab Dvalishvili, there was an announcement made for UFC 309, which will be at Madison Square Garden in New York, November 16th this year. It'll be headlined by, you guessed it, all been speculated for months and months and months. Finally, the announcement comes. It's going to be, maybe, Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic. Jon Jones, the light heavyweight GOAT. Dana White's GOAT. Dana White's pound for pound best. Stipe Miocic, the heavyweight GOAT. Arguably the best heavyweight of all time in MMA. Now, they will finally maybe be fighting, because they were finally supposed to fight a year ago, and that finally fell apart. And now this one, we'll see what happens. Stipe Miocic is getting up there in age. Jon Jones, as we know, also getting up there in age, wants to have maybe one more fight if it will come to fruition, and probably try to cement himself as the best fighter of all time with a win over an aging Stipe Miocic. It is what it is. That is the storyline as we know it today. Now, what's interesting is that Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler was announced for the co-main event. Yes, that's right. Michael Chandler, who was supposed to be taking on Conor McGregor, has been waiting months and months and years now for Conor McGregor and his fight to come to fruition, is now going to be rematching Charles Oliveira in the co-main event of UFC 309. Yes, that's right. The two most, I'd argue, carnage-based fighters you will see. Justin Gaethje loves a blood and guts war. Dustin Poirier loves a blood and guts war. But Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler are two guys that go in there for a war every single fight out. Every single time they fight, it is an absolute war and a beatdown either which way. This one we are all excited to see. It's going to be a 5-round co-main event for this one at 309. So we'll see what else they stack on the card. What they announced for the card also was Bo Nickel taking on Paul Craig, the undefeated wrestler. Bo Nickel, big prospect, coming up through the middleweight division, will be taking on Paul Craig, who's moving down from light heavyweight. Again, the submission artist, very, very dangerous on the ground, has looked a bit lackluster in his last couple of fights, not looking at the top of his performance anymore, getting a little older. Bo Nickel is a wrestler, so can he stay safe on the ground against Paul Craig? That will be the question. And then they also announced, they said it was going to be Karine Silva versus Viviane Araújo. Don't really care about that fight. Vivian, she's got a lot of power in her hands, but it is what it is. But you know it, and I know it. The guy we all want to see come back is Dominic Reyes. He'll be taking on Anthony Smith in this one. Dominic Reyes, let's get this guy back on a win streak, get him back to the title. This would be one of the greatest redemption stories in the history of the UFC. And Anthony Smith is the guy to do it against. An aging, weak fighter in Anthony Smith, a guy who's great on the commentary, really has a good mind for the game of MMA, but just doesn't have the physical presence anymore to carry with him what he needs to do in the cage. I'd like to see this one. Excited for this one for Dominic Reyes, maybe to get back in the win column after his last win against Dustin Jacoby. Get another win together, get up there in the top 10. We'll see what happens. Anyway, next will be the return of Chris Weidman after his last couple of fights. He'll be taking on Eric Anders, ya boy. He'll be fighting an aging Chris Weidman, a damaged Chris Weidman. Somebody athletic and strong like Eric Anders could get the win here, but Chris Weidman, we know, has probably the better technique, the better trained martial artist. Eric Anders, coming from a football career, has looked decent the last couple of years, but just doesn't have quite what it takes in terms of the technique that really needs to be up here in the UFC anymore. And then a fun, high-ranked light heavyweight matchup, which is really, really solid. We'll be flying under the radar here, is Nikita Krylov and Azamat Murzakanov. Azamat Murzakanov, a little bit of a stockier guy, but he's undefeated, and Nikita Krylov is an absolute finisher. Kill or be killed, die by the sword, live by the sword kind of fighter. That one's going to be fun. And then Jonathan Martinez coming back over that Jose Aldo fight. We'll be taking on Marcus McGee, one of the most underrated fighters in the bantamweight division right now. A guy who's flying under the radar, doesn't talk a lot of trash, but just a really, really well-rounded martial artist. It's always dangerous when you have a good, well-rounded martial artist. This is Marcus McGee in name. We know this guy. If you know what you're looking for, if you're a hardcore, you know who Marcus McGee is. Look forward to this one. This one's going to be a fun one. Who's coming? Who's going in the bantamweight division? Veronica Hardy, the wife of Dan Hardy, the commentator for the PFL, the British fighter who took on many, many fighters in the UFC years ago. This is Veronica Hardy, if you didn't know. Don't really care about this fight all that much. Eduardo Mora, she's kind of up and coming off Contender Series. She looked decent on the come up, but I just don't care a lot about that one. And then finally, Mickey Gall, the 7-6 fighter, still in the UFC, really made a name for himself for beating CM Punk back in the day, taking on Ramez Bramimaj. Good card overall. Early prelims, not so great. They are what they are. It's early prelims. The prelims, though, looking solid with Jonathan Martinez, Nikita Krylov, Chris Weidman, and Araujo. Expect that one to be on the early prelims or the prelims, whatever. It's a high-ranking women's fight. But the main event and the co-main event, Joe Jones versus Stipe Miocic, and Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler, plus Bo Nickel and Paul Craig, also on the main card for sure. Anthony Smith, Dominic Reyes. Those are all going to be fun ones to look forward to. Probably be a lot of finishes on this card, as we can see, but you never know. Good, exciting fight. So finally, UFC 309, Jones versus Miocic has been announced. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the next one.